My father-in-law confessed his feelings for me. My husband overheard everything. I had always believed I married into a family of prestige, power, and deep-rooted loyalty. Ethan and I had been together for 4 years, married for 3. He was the love of my life. Steady, devoted, the kind of man you could rely on. His father, Richard Caldwell, was a titan in the business world, a man whose word could shift stock markets, whose name carried weight in every corner of high society. From the outside, my life was picture perfect. A husband who adored me, a career I was passionate about, and a family that, while strict, was a symbol of wealth and influence. But what I didn't know was that underneath the grand chandeliers and pristine marble floors, a shadow had been growing, one that I had been too blind to see. Richard entered my life not just as my father-in-law, but as a man who had built an empire and expected unwavering loyalty. He had a presence that commanded attention, silver-streaked hair, always neatly styled, piercing blue eyes that seemed to assess everything in a room within seconds, and a voice that carried both charm and quiet authority. I had admired his intellect, his business acumen, but somewhere along the way, his admiration for me had shifted into something else entirely. At first, I ignored it. Maybe I didn't want to believe it. Maybe I thought I was imagining things. But the signs were there, a lingering touch on my hand during dinner, a slow, assessing glance when I entered a room. Compliments that went beyond what a father-in-law should say. "You have an elegance that women twice your age would kill for," Richard had once said at a gala, his eyes holding mine just a second too long. I had laughed it off, making some joke about good posture, but the comment had left a strange feeling in my gut. Then came the gifts. A diamond bracelet for my birthday, far too extravagant. An imported perfume, he said, reminded him of me. When I had tried to refuse, saying Ethan already got me something, Richard had simply smirked. A woman like you deserves to be showered with beautiful things," he had said, pressing the velvet box into my palm. I had pushed my discomfort aside, convinced myself it was just his way. A rich man who liked to be generous, a businessman who didn't think twice about spending money. But then came the moments that felt like warnings, even if I didn't understand them at the time. "You should take a more active role in the company," he once suggested during a private lunch. A lunch I hadn't even agreed to, but somehow found myself attending. I had smiled politely. "Oh, I don't know. Richard, I love what I do, and Ethan's the one with the business mind." "Ethan's good, but he's not you," he had murmured, watching me in a way that made my stomach tighten. Then, at the Caldwell family gala, I could no longer deny what was happening. The estate was glowing with golden chandeliers, the air thick with polite laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Guests in tailored suits and shimmering gowns exchanged pleasantries, but beneath the surface, every conversation was a carefully constructed power play. I wore an emerald green satin gown, the low-cut neckline draping elegantly over my collarbones. Ethan had always loved this dress, always said it made my eyes stand out. As I moved through the crowd, I spotted him, standing near the grand staircase, talking to Richard and a few high-profile investors. I started to make my way over, but then I saw it. The way Richard was looking at me, not as a father-in-law, not as someone who respected my place in the family, but as a man who wanted something. He raised his glass slightly, his piercing blue eyes scanning me from across the room, and for the first time, I felt truly uneasy. I kept walking, brushing off the feeling, but it only got worse when I reached them. "Ah, Olivia," Richard said smoothly, reaching for my hand before I could even greet them. His fingers brushed over my knuckles, lingering just long enough to make my breath hitch. "You look radiant tonight." Ethan chuckled, placing a hand on my back. "She always does." Richard's gaze flicked to Ethan, then back to me. "Yes, a woman like Olivia. She shines effortlessly." I forced a polite smile, stepping slightly closer to Ethan. "Thank you, Richard. The event is beautiful as always." "Only the best for my family," he said, his lips curving. Then, in a voice just low enough for only me to hear, he added, "And for the people who make it worth having." A chill ran down my spine. I didn't react, didn't let the words show on my face. But something had shifted in that moment. Something undeniable. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't being paranoid. Richard wanted me. And worse, he didn't seem to care what that meant. For weeks, I tried to convince myself that I had misread Richard's intentions. That maybe I was imagining things, projecting something onto his actions that wasn't really there. But deep down, I knew the truth. Richard's behavior didn't stop. If anything, it became bolder. It was in the way he always found reasons to be alone with me, the way his compliments grew more personal, how his presence started to linger just a little too long. "Ethan is a good man, but he doesn't appreciate you the way he should," he told me once after a family dinner, his voice smooth as silk. I forced a polite smile. "I don't know what you mean." His lips curled into a smirk. "Oh, I think you do, Olivia." Ethan had been away on a business trip for the past few days. It wasn't unusual for him to be gone, and I had planned to spend the evening alone, catching up on some reading. Then, Richard showed up at my door. I hesitated before opening it, my pulse quickening. He had never come to our house alone before. "Richard," I said cautiously, "is something wrong?" He smiled, stepping inside without an invitation. "I was in the area and thought I'd check in on you. You must be lonely with Ethan away." I forced a smile. "I'm fine. Really? Just having a quiet night." But Richard didn't leave. Instead, he poured himself a drink, settling into the armchair across from me. "You know, Olivia, I've been thinking a lot lately." I swallowed hard. "About what?" He tilted his glass, watching the amber liquid swirl. "About you." A chill ran down my spine. "Richard, You're an incredible woman, Olivia." He leaned forward, his piercing blue eyes locked onto mine. "I've never met anyone quite like you." I let out a nervous laugh, shifting in my seat. "That's kind of you to say, but I mean it," he interrupted. "You're wasted on Ethan." The air in the room thickened. I froze. "What?" Richard sighed, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. "I've watched you. The way you handle yourself. The way you carry this family on your shoulders, while Ethan remains distracted by work. You deserve more than him." I stood, suddenly feeling trapped in my own home. "Richard, you need to leave." He rose too, stepping closer. Too close. "Why fight it?" he murmured. "You feel it too, don't you? This undeniable connection." My skin crawled. This couldn't be happening. "I love my husband," I said, my voice firm. Richard's expression darkened. "Do you?" A cold smile curled his lips. "Because I see the way you look at me, Olivia." His hand brushed my arm. I yanked away. "You're insane." Then the front door creaked open, and Ethan stepped inside. For a second, none of us moved. Then, his gaze locked onto Richard, onto me, and everything fell apart. Silence stretched across the room, suffocating and unbearable. Ethan stood at the entrance, his expression unreadable, shock, anger, and something dangerously close to doubt flickering in his brown eyes. Richard, ever the manipulator, was the first to break the silence. "Ethan," he said smoothly, his voice calm, controlled. "I know this looks bad." I turned sharply. Looks bad? Was he really about to spin this into something else? "I didn't want to tell you like this," Richard continued, sighing heavily, as if he were the victim in all of this. "But Olivia, she's been coming on to me for months." My breath caught. "What?" My voice cracked. Richard turned to me with calculated sadness, shaking his head. "I told her we couldn't, that you didn't deserve this, but she—" Ethan clenched his jaw. "Ah, Dad! What the hell are you saying?" Richard stepped closer to his son, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I didn't want to hurt you, son, but you had to know the truth. Olivia, she's been playing both of us." Something inside me snapped. I stormed forward, shoving Richard's hand off Ethan. "You're lying! You manipulative bastard!" Richard's gaze turned ice cold. "Careful, Olivia. You wouldn't want to sound defensive." Ethan took a step back, his trust in me unraveling by the second. I could see it, the hesitation in his eyes. He wanted to believe me, but this was his father. And that was when I realized, this wasn't just about me. This was about control. Richard wasn't just trying to seduce me, he was trying to ruin me, and Ethan was letting him. I exhaled sharply, shoving my emotions down. If Richard wanted a war, I'd give him one. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I spent hours digging, pulling together every piece of evidence I had. Text messages, surveillance footage, and past records of Richard's indiscretions. Things the world had long ignored. By sunrise, I had a case, and I wasn't going to keep quiet anymore. The moment Richard stepped into his corporate office that morning, the media storm hit. Richard Caldwell, business mogul or manipulative predator? Leaked evidence suggests Caldwell's inappropriate advances toward his own daughter-in-law. Ex-employees speak out. A pattern of power abuse? Richard's pristine reputation was burning. The footage from our security cameras, the one of him touching my arm, leaning too close, whispering in my ear, was now everywhere. And former employees came forward, their NDAs no longer holding weight against the public outrage. Ethan called me that night. "I don't know what to say," he whispered. I exhaled, my heart tired, bruised, but no longer broken. "Then don't say anything, Ethan. Just listen." I told him everything, every unwanted touch, every manipulative word. How I had tried to ignore it, tried to protect him from the truth. And then I ended with, "You doubted me." Ethan's silence was all the confirmation I needed. We were over. Days later, I found myself face to face with Richard one last time. He was no longer the powerful man he had once been. His company had pushed him out. His investors had cut ties, and his empire was in free fall. But still, he smirked. "You think you won?" he murmured, taking a slow sip of his whiskey. I tilted my head. "Oh, Richard, you still don't get it, do you?" He arched a brow. "You didn't just lose," I continued, voice steady. "I took everything from you. The power you thrived on, the respect you commanded, gone. And the best part? You did it to yourself." Richard exhaled sharply, his mask finally cracking. I leaned in, lowering my voice. "The difference between you and me? I never needed power to destroy you. I just needed the truth." For the first time ever, Richard Caldwell had nothing to say, and that was how I knew I had won. Ethan and I divorced within months. There was no hatred, just a quiet understanding that we could never go back. Richard's fall from grace was permanent. I moved forward, stronger, smarter, and unshakable. Because in the end, the truth didn't just set me free. It destroyed the man who tried to break me. Some people believe power makes them untouchable, that no matter what they do, who they manipulate, who they destroy, they will always come out on top. But the truth? The truth is the ultimate weapon. Richard thought he could control me, silence me, ruin me. He thought he could twist reality, use his power to turn my own husband against me. But in the end, his lies unraveled. He lost everything, and I walked away stronger. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's a story about self-worth, about fighting for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against you. Because the moment you let fear silence you, you let the manipulators win. I hope this story serves as a reminder. Never let anyone gaslight you into doubting your own reality. Trust your instincts, stand your ground, and when the time comes, don't be afraid to burn it all down.